Now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce a 1964 Boettcher scholar, Russell George. And I'm going to need my notes for this because his titles are very, very long. He is a graduate of Rifle High School, Colorado State University, and Harvard Law School. In addition to practicing law, he served as a state representative and was elected as the Speaker of the House in 1999. He went on to serve as the director of the Colorado Division of Wildlife, was later appointed by Governor Bill Owens as the executive director of the Colorado Department of Natural Resources, and then by another governor, Bill Ritter, as the executive director of the Colorado Department of Transportation. Today, he serves as the president of the Colorado Northwestern Community College and as a member of the board of trustees for the Boettcher Foundation. Also of note, I tried to come up with some dirt through some Google and Facebook stalking. He's completely clean. The only sort of interesting facts that I were able to find were that there's a great hall that's named after him over at CSU, which I think is sort of like a life dream of mine. And there is a Facebook page where you can like Russ's efforts on the Colorado Water Conservation Board, which have been pretty extraordinary. So please join me in welcoming 1964 Boettcher scholar, Russ George.
What a wonderful treat to be able to stand up here with Annie. You are terrific. So what we were trying to do with this opening, keynotes are always meant to set the tone for the activities of the day. And so we're well towards that. What we wanted to do with my part of it is to show the strength of time and how some things change over time and some things are timeless and don't change. So we want to start with this absolutely classic example of today's Boettcher scholar as where we've come to. And then reaching back in time to sort of remember how it was that all of this started and what has happened since. And so my story will be as an example, and I think there's probably maybe a dozen folks in this room who could also tell the story and it would be very similar. So what I would say, even though it is all about me, and we do always like to have that opportunity, I suppose, it really isn't. It's just an example of what we were thinking, what were the times like then as a Boettcher scholar, and what was the milieu in which the Boettcher Scholarship Program was working. So my story, I think, really starts in the late 50s, early 60s. I was raised on a farm outside of Rifle, between Rifle and Silt. Hardworking people. My mother's family were immigrants from Eastern Europe. My dad's family had been in the United States for several generations, all farmers. And so we were living on a farm, and it was hard work, good life, all was fine, except I can always remember my folks saying, education's the key. Education is everything. But it really clicked when he said, okay, if you have to study, I'll do your chores. Now, any of us could pick up on that one. And I sure did, but it told you that my dad and my mother would really put into play what they believed. So education was where we focused. And I can remember really being focused on it in what we then called junior high. But particularly in my last year of junior high, 8th grade, I had one of these great teachers, and we've all had them. And we honored a number of them last night. Well, the first one that I really remember was my 8th grade homeroom teacher, and she's the one who first mentioned Boettcher to me. That's my first connection and recollection. And I can remember the impression that this was something way big. Wasn't quite sure what that meant, but it was clear that this Boettcher Foundation, Boettcher Scholarship was something just in kind of by itself, in a league by itself. But that's where it started, and then of course through high school, more teachers who would pay attention to a student who was trying, and they could see that education mattered and that they wanted to do something to help encourage that and nurture that. So certainly by, it would be 1963, it became clear where the Boettcher Foundation would be in my life then. And of course, for a person of 17, 18 years of age thinking about college, when we thought Boettcher Scholarship, we thought money. Fact of life, call it like it is. The family was going to be sure that we all made it to college and made it through. It was going to be hard, probably meant having to work as a student along with taking classes. But to think about, is it possible? Could this really be possible that somebody else could pay and would pay for my college education? So of course the counselors and everyone were saying to a number of us A students there, you must apply for the Boettcher Scholarship. Well, what the Boettcher Scholarship was doing in those days was truly rare. There were very few full-ride scholarship opportunities in 1964, and certainly none in Colorado that had the Colorado roots, the Colorado history. And even at that early point in time, those of us applying for a Boettcher Scholarship began to understand that this scholarship was special in another way, that it was for Coloradoans, for Colorado. That was really new. But we started getting that, started thinking it. And of course, how it came about is if you can get the scholarship, you will get it if you stay within Colorado. Go to a Colorado college. That was very unusual too. But there was more there. It was a little more subtle and less interesting to an 18-year-old headed for college. But it was the piece of it that said, and maybe after you work your next 4 years in a Colorado college, you'll go on to do something more. You will be more. And would you please do more in Colorado as you choose your life's work? That was always known. It was kind of sitting off here to the edge. So like everyone else in this room, the day was coming when the dreaded interview had to happen. And I'm certain, I honestly can tell you, I was no less scared or anxious or worried than any of you. So the day came, and I headed over. I think it was one of these office buildings over here, maybe the building where the Boettcher and Company was office. Certainly the foundation was there. And I'd done what research I could. You didn't have Google in those days. So it was a little tricky to try to get, the information that's going to help you be outstanding in the interview. I didn't know a Boettcher scholar at that point in time. There had been, I think, one from Rifle High School in 1956, none other before then, and I just was not running in a circle where it was easy or that I had the courage to go track down a recent Boettcher scholar and get the goods. What do we say? How do we do it? So I felt kind of on my own. So I remember, now you young people won't believe this, but us old folks can remember pretty clearly 50 years ago. And I can remember like yesterday how I felt that spring afternoon as I went up the elevator. My mother was my chauffeur, and she was more anxious than me, of course. And she stayed out in the lobby and said, "Go, it's you, it's yours." So I remember walking in this door, and here's this room with about half a dozen people in it. And I shouldn't say this, but I have to. My first thought was, oh, they're all old people. So the reason I can get away with saying that is I think everyone in that room that day was about my age today. And I had expected this to be sort of official, stern business. And, you know, the kind of stuff that scares the daylights out of 18-year-old kids. And so just as soon as the door opened, I walked in. The chairman got up from his chair, walked right over to me, and in the nicest, kindliest way, made me feel welcome. That was right off the bat. So I sat down and we started, they were leading the conversation at that point, and I didn't know it at the time, but I certainly feel it now, that their whole purpose was to set me at ease. Now remember, in those days, it was just the Board of Trustees who were the interviewing team. So the trustees who were making the decisions were the ones who were interviewing all of us. 1964, there were 40 scholars and probably 80 or 100 finalists. I don't know how many people applied in those days. Remember, it was a smaller time, let's call it. Still, all across the state, the very best students were applying, so it was still pretty competitive. But the volume was such that the trustees themselves could manage it. So there they all were, and I knew that was going to be the case. And so as part of this conversation of them trying to get me to calm down a little bit, they said, well, did you have a good trip here? Where did you come from Rifle? Of course, those days was no I-70, none of that. So yes, it was quite a trip. But I said, as a matter of fact, I did not come from Rifle. I just came from Fort Collins. Oh, what were you doing in Fort Collins? So I had to tell them this story, and it was a little bit of a risk. I said, well, you may know from my application that I am State Secretary of the Future Farmers of America. And part of my responsibility this morning was to give a keynote speech to the annual state convention of the Future Homemakers of America. And they said, well, how was that? And I said, well, it was kind of neat being the only guy among 300 high school girls. My gamble paid off. I don't remember much about the interview after that. But I then, like all of you, had to endure that dreaded wait. And again, remember, this is 1964. We don't have smartphones. We don't have cell phones. All we have is the phone in the kitchen in the farmhouse. Nobody uses long distance very much, so the communication was going to be by the U.S. mail. Well, remember, rural, so you can't just go down to the post office and look in the box every 15 minutes to see if the letter's there. Well, in my case, as it turns out, it was a Saturday. I remember quite well because I was home farming, and we were looking every day, and the mail would come at 10 o'clock. The mailbox was about a quarter mile down the road. So I'm doing whatever I'm doing on the tractor in the field where I can see the mailbox. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't doing a very good job keeping whatever row I was working on straight. But what I also assumed was that my mother was in the house doing the same thing. And so I get emotional when I say this, so you got to forgive me. So I'm here watching, and pretty soon here comes the car out of the yard, just zoom, down the highway. And of course, she'd seen the mail carrier before I had, because see, I was planning to be at the bottom of the row by the road when he came by. So she got there first, so I thought, oh, okay, fine, whatever, she's mom, it's okay. Pretty soon, I see her walking out across the field, and she's carrying this piece of mail. And I thought, did she open it? What's her countenance? Is she jumping up and down? Is she? Well, she was just walking. And bless her, she did not open it. She let me do that, and of course, neither one of us was really able to do it. But that's where it was in our hearts. That's how important all of this was to us. And I just will never forget that. And really, that was just the beginning. Because for all of you, as for me, it opened up a world that I had not known. It gave each of us the opportunity to be a part of what we saw here that had already been going on for a while, and actually gave us a chance to be part of this family. It gave us encouragement, inspiration, confidence, courage, when an outfit like the Boettcher Foundation and those lovely people that I met in the interview saw something in me that caused them to acknowledge me in 1964 as one of the 40 top students in Colorado, then I started believing maybe I had something worthwhile and could do more. That's the Boettcher Scholarship. And every one of us in this room felt that at some time and probably continue to feel it nearly every day, because it is absolutely true. And I'm quite sure that by the time I went on to Colorado State University and met my fellow scholars, that there was, I don't know that I consciously appreciated all that was opening up in front of me. But all I know is that because I didn't have to work, because I had my bills paid, I could concentrate on my studies, I could do honors programs, I could study whatever I wanted. I could just do things that I would not have been able to do without that support. So that's where things really took off. And of course, the annual trip down to John Mitchell's house was a treat. That was the only time of the year that all of the Boettcher scholars across the state would get acquainted. And in those days, most of the scholars were at Boulder. So there'd be this big crowd of them come in and our not so big crowd from CSU. But so we stood taller, you know. So, but it also gave us a chance to get acquainted a little bit better with the trustees and others. And for me, it certainly was a feeling that, you know, there is this bigger world, and these people are all just like us. And they're all really nice, and they're really smart, and they talk about important things outside themselves. That really struck with me. And there was oftentimes the talk about the importance of character, the importance of service, the importance of doing something more than just what it is that you would do for yourself. And so as the years went on, my success at CSU gave me then the dream come true of being able to go to Ivy League for law school. It had been my dream to be a lawyer. I had never quite had the courage to dream I could be a Harvard lawyer, but it happened, and I think I had always worked harder, strived more because I was a Boettcher scholar. I'm certain of that. And then as the years went by, and I think this happens to all of us, we get on about our lives and raising our children and performing our careers, and we don't think so much about the Boettcher Foundation or all that it does, or even about the scholarship. The checks were great, we're grateful for it, but now it's time to move on. I remember that era in my heart. Well, without really knowing it, because I was doing other things, the Boettcher Foundation began to change. Certainly we knew life as we know it was changing. Think about how much different our world is today than it was in the 1960s. And you all know that. Well, the Boettcher Foundation was changing at the same time. And that was interesting. And so occasionally I would run into folks that were Boettcher scholars or people that I'd somehow, we had a connection with the Boettcher Foundation. And certainly in the mid-90s, I would occasionally get to see a fellow Western Sloper by the name of Tim Schultz. I was in legislature at that time. I'd always wanted to take my law degree to the next level. I thought lawmaking was the next level for what I saw as a scholarship side of law. And so I was around in Denver quite a lot. Tim was doing a number of things here, but particularly he was starting in the Boettcher Foundation. And so that caused me to start watching and thinking. A number of years later, a dream that hadn't even been a dream because it was so far out of sight occurred. And that was that I was invited to be a member of the Board of Trustees of the Boettcher Foundation. I thought, so this is what heaven looks like. Except I was still awake, and they did expect me to work at it. So for that opportunity, and I guess it's been about 6 or 7, 8 years ago, I had the dubious position of having to follow Paul Chan in that seat. I mean, they create a seat for scholars and then put that genius, hardworking, brilliant man in it and then say, Russ, now you need to do it. Well, he set the standard and the tone for Boettcher scholars on the Board of Trustees. And then later was Dr. Allen. And now, somehow the world has changed again. And even though each of us came off when the other went in, all three of us are now on the Board of Trustees. What a wonderful thing for all of us. And it has given me the chance to see how tremendously the foundation has grown with the times. This sort of event here today was unheard of, was not thought about, never attempted in the early days. And that was fine because that was the times. But everything is different. And so all of us being here is very appropriate, as appropriate, if not more, for today than not doing these kinds of things then. And boy, that's a powerful thing. The Boettcher family set in motion a set of principles that are every bit as important today as it was then. We are part of that belief and imagination. And the parts that matter most of all to me is that in their lifetimes they were smart, they were productive, they were creative, they were intelligent, they did all of the things that ambitious people want to do and be. They were accomplishing, they were striving and thriving. And all the same time they're looking around, what can I do for you? What can I do for your community? What can I do for arts, culture, education, young people? And so, by the way they lived their lives, this foundation has carried on in that same vein. We think often about the things the family had said, what they wanted the foundation to accomplish. And it's happening. And they would be very proud. I know Claudia, who served on the trustee, she was still there. I got to serve with her. I know how proud she is, and you see her on the video. And I know she takes great comfort in knowing her dad and granddad and great-granddad would be proud of what we're doing today. The parts that really stuck with me were the service side. It just stuck because it was part of that conversation with the trustees, and it just fit like hand in glove for me. And so as I look over all of the good fortune that I've had to be able to serve in various capacities, I certainly start with my folks who were the same way. You serve, you learn, you grow, and then to have the support of the Boettcher Foundation all these years is just the key for the service that I've been fortunate enough to accomplish. So, what a wonderful legacy. And all right here for Coloradoans in Colorado. The dream has worked. But actually, I think the best is yet to come. Because I see ladies like this, and I see all of you out here, even my age. We're still out there. We're still here. We're still thinking. We're still trying to do something. And all of you younger ones who are right in the middle of accomplishing your goals and dreams, we're sharpening up the connection. We're sharpening up the principles by being here. I think this effort of the foundation today to bring in the scholars, do more with the scholars, recognize us that we actually are a group of common purpose. And that common purpose, when nurtured, will know no bounds of what we can do. Look what we've all been able to do so far as Boettcher scholars. Look at that. When you can accumulate that and then see what synergy comes from more of us going the same direction for a common purpose, it would just be phenomenal. That's what's all about. And I know every one of you in here has that thought. That's why you came. It's great that this is being done. It's very hard to put something like this together. And it's happening. It's going to, the rest of the day, I think we're all going to continue to learn and to enjoy. And I think it's the beginning of something really great to come. And I, as a 1964 Boettcher scholar, am very proud to be here with you. Best of luck to all of us.